Hey guys, welcome back to Pillbox Movies. I'm Hank, and in today's episode, we're going to be watching the 1975 film Seven Beauties. This is an Italian film by director Lina Wertmüller. Wertmüller was actually the first female director nominated for a Best Director Award at the Academy Awards for this film. So yeah, I've heard about Wertmüller's work for a while now. I've been wanting to check them out, and I've heard this may be perhaps her masterpiece. Perhaps not the best way to enter in on a director's oeuvre, but I am nothing if not inconsistent. So yeah, let's watch Seven Beauties. It's always an interesting pairing, though, images of World War II with a kind of bluesy rock. Dr. Strangelove wasn't bluesy, but it's an interesting kind of contrast, that kind of Americana paired with the atrocities of the majority European war.
Quelli che fanno un lavoro d'equipe, convinti di essere stati assunti da un'altra ditta. Oh yeah. Quelli che hanno italiani, se si fanno girare I coglioni. Oh yeah.
Why is this video of Mussolini upside down?
Quelli che votano a destra perché basta costi scioperi. Oh yeah. Quelli che votano scheda bianca.
Yeah, you forced me to vote for the right because of your strikes. I normally support unions unless they do something disruptive. As relevant now as it ever was.
Quelli che perdono la guerra per un pelo, oh yeah. Quelli che qui è tutto un casino. Quelli che adesso ci facciamo due risate.
Amazing.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna pause here. Wow, what an amazing opening monologue. Okay, so what is just a brilliant way to open up the film with this like kind of massive contradictions showing the horrors of war and having this monologue with the refrain of oh yeah, this very cool casual refrain. And I think it speaks to the what I see as the attitude that this film or this opening monologue is taking towards an approach of centrism. I think it's applicable now as it was back in 1975, reflecting over the wartime years, that war as a social catastrophe, as a worldwide catastrophe, elicits a lot of extremes and contradictions, that there are so many highs and so many lows that the human brain can't comprehend the enormity of its surroundings. I mean, we have that now with like with scandal and with catastrophe and with worldwide climactic events, each in succession with each other, thinking about the beginning of 2020, but also like we're just so inundated with events of such magnitude and seeming contradiction that a human response is to take one of centrism or of passivity. Like, the world is too much, I'm going to shut down, I'm going to not respond, and the best response is like the status quo, pretend that nothing is happening, as long as it's not affecting me, it's nothing really is going on. And this is striking directly at that attitudes and saying that if we as like a people take these extremes of our times and flatten them into something that's just culture, or just a 24-hour news cycle, or if it's entertainment, just something that you're scrolling through and not directly responding to, you are going to enable or allow, or through your own inaction, certify these atrocities to continue to occur, that no centrist has ever been like the spark of change for these human disasters. And I think it's really well expressed through this refrain of oh yeah, this like lilting, casual, irreverent refrain of oh yeah, taking the scope of human atrocity of World War II and saying oh yeah. It's such a slap in the face, but it really is representative of this mindset of passivity, which I'm sure we're going to explore with our protagonist as the film goes on. So yeah, really, really interesting opening to this movie.
Oddio, mamma! Oh, Madonna, signore! Gesù! Cazzo! Gesù! Ma tu sei italiano? E te? E chi sei te? Questi tedeschi che prima sparano, poi chiedono chi va là. A me lo dici. Sarà la Germania, cosa vuoi che sia?
And also, I like this kind of statement that's being made, this layer that's being created in terms of nationalism, of national identity, that war is both stoking and dissolving these trends of nationalism, that these characters lost in the woods are quickly are first to trying to identify each other based on nationality, and that kind of makes sense, that based on your nationality, you'll see if you're an ally or if you're an aggressor. So they try to identify each other as Italians. They say that Germans have a completely different culture, that they will shoot first and then ask who's there. But really, it's kind of like immaterial to the actual conditions they're in this war. Where they are in the war is not based on nationality. They're not in Italy, they're not in Germany, they're in a train, they're in a forest. It's based on actual tangible places rather than ideas of nation. And so, like, I'm sure there'll be a similar kind of heightening, but also kind of paradoxically a decentralization or dissolving of their national identity as the movie continues.
La verità è che io qua ferite non ne tengo. Oramai sono disertore o peggio.
No, peggio. È fatta bene, eh? Sembra vera.
Yeah, constant dissolving of the lines of reality and fiction. Fiction being nationality, fiction being a wound or a war, and reality being a bomb or a bullet.
Mamma mia, che brutta cosa che gelosia. Rita Marianne che parla da biona. A fanno per sprezza, odiosa sanziona.
We see a clear, like, color distinction between the imagined past and the present. The present is desaturated and cold and cruel, and this past imagined version of Italy is vibrant and colorful. Look at the break on those pants, wow. Prime Italian. Primo Italian. Just that red light highlighting him in the background. Just beautiful framing with showing the actual stage in the mirror. Oh my god. So we actually see that Pasqualino is actually a very controlling, aggressive person in his past, that he has a semblance of patriarchal control over his sisters and their destinies, and it's an interesting kind of like layering that perhaps this is something that's evident in Italian culture that will be subsumed and consumed by fascism, that there are the kind of like levels of this hierarchical structure that are inherent, that'll evolve or devolve into something worse and more cruel, and will end up affecting him in the same way that his patriarchy or his misogyny affects his sisters.
Mi raccomando, cara. Occhi bassi e contenti. La prima di scarra fornisce ammazzato.
This is an interesting idea tied to the kind of the patriarchy. I'm gonna pause for a second. Pausing 3, 2, 1, pause. The idea that that's actually kind of like interesting kind of symbiotic relationship of the modesty of like the church or culture tying into patriarchy or control of women. The idea that a woman should be modest and avert her eyes, that if you ever see a woman's eyes, that means that she's trying to entice you, that means that she's a harlot. But that core tenet of modesty is actually hiding inside of it like a snake. It's a Trojan horse that, by imposing this continued stance of modesty, of shrinking away, of keeping your eyes averted, you're naturally setting women in a submissive position, in a position where they can't assert themselves, that they can't question their husbands or their fathers or their cousins or their brothers. And it instills hierarchy through something that's ostensibly about purity or chastity, much like, you know, things that certain American parties are currently doing. Who's to say? And it'll be interesting to see how the film kind of frames events from the perspective of this character. I think it ties in with the opening monologue, the kind of blasé attitude of the oh yeah, this kind of nonchalant Lothario character, that he is not in a kind of like mental state or kind of like cultural state to really like comment on or to really appreciate the circumstances of how they entered into this war or how their lives are affected by the war. And he only views it from the vantage point of his own kind of position of hierarchy or patriarchy.
Quando uno non sa far rispettare la famiglia sua.
Arresta! Arresta! In una verità, voglio capire che taccire prima.
Non me la giri, io voglio bene.
Ma vaffanculo tu e l'amore!
Malafangul. I love his nose. Giancarlo Giannini. It's such a like, it's I mean it's very prominent, but it's very directive. It kind of like shows his energy. This is very, very interesting, this kind of formatting this like a duel. I want to speak more about that, but we tend to think of duels as like being about honor, about preserving the honor and integrity of the woman. But this is contextualizing duel as being about masculinity, as about like staking territory and asserting male dominance, which Pasqualino promptly loses. All this stuff that he was able to do with the women, his mother, the sisters in his life, when faced with a male authority, he's immediately destroyed. And I'm sure we'll see a similar sequence on a national level, the Italian identity being made subservient by the German war machine. Yeah, so it's not really about his sister's honor at all. He's more offended by being called a miserable worm. This can't be the same year as Apocalypse Now, right? No, Apocalypse Now is 79. Both Lina Wertmüller and Francis Ford Coppola have very dramatic flair for musical selections. What a pairing, Jesus Christ. Of course, people remember Ride of the Valkyries in association with Apocalypse Now and the bombing of the Vietnamese village, but this is, like, shocking. So is Pasqualino and his associate, his friend, going to be taken to the concentration camp? This is something going back to what I said earlier about the kind of like disillusion of these boundaries that we perceive, these boundaries such as national identity, things that we think will keep us safe, things that we think will separate us or endear us, or that link and bind or separate us, and in fact they don't mean anything under the circumstances of war, that there's only brutality. And that in this kind of like hierarchy of brutality, those at the top will enact violence upon every single rung below them.
Mussolini, Hitler, Salazar, tutti falliti, mi vengono male le bombe, amico.
See Spanish?
Sono industriali della muerte.
Ah yes, this is Fernando Rey. You'll recognize him from a lot of Buñuel's work.
E nessuno dice niente. Ma come gli ebrei? Ma che caspita che erano tanto furbi, tanto figli e drocchi. I russi che hanno fatto quella poi rivoluzione.
Yeah, again we have this demarcation of countries, of national identities, things that we as like people within our own city-state or own nation-state think other countries are like, other polities are like, their national identities, and under the extreme oppression of the concentration camp of war, none of it is relevant. There's no such thing as these distinguishing factors of nationality. It's been long since disseminated down into like pop culture, but seeing this image of the violinists playing in the concentration camps is just so striking.
E femminile su femminile, Pasqualì. E una femmina, per quanto può essere cattiva, fosse pure a streghe.
Is he gonna try and flirt with the commandant?
Se arriva al cuore, dentro un po' di zucchero ci trovo sempre. Ma è tanto che già vota, e tanto che già gira, con dolce sotto tazza fine, e mocca ma
I also really love, as a point of contrast, that his family worked in linens, and specifically like these kind of like soft cottons or feathers and stuff, and there's a contrast between those soft linens of his childhood and the harsh, dry, emaciated linens of the concentration camp. This is an interesting inversion of the masculinity or the patriarchal tropes of earlier in the film, having his oppressor be a woman, a German commandant. It's such a weird tone. I mean, it's really a really hard tone to get right. Comedy in a concentration camp scenario. I mean, arguably, some people would say that La Vita è Bella is the high watermark of this, and I don't know. I haven't watched the movie in a while, so I can't really say. And he's finding himself in a position that he was chastising his sister for, that he was abusing his sister for. He's going to try and whore himself out for survival. And this isn't really necessary commentary on what he's doing. I don't think it's wrong for him to try this. Just like, you know, using your body for survival isn't a terrible thing. Perhaps the circumstances are terrible. Obviously, the circumstances for both are terrible, but their actual actions are not to be condemned.
Peccato perché io ci credo nell'uomo, ma deve fare presto. Deve fare presto a nascere. A nascere l'uomo nuovo, l'essere civile, non quella bestia purtroppo intelligente che ha rotto l'armonia del mondo, distrutto il sacro equilibrio antico della natura solo per massacrare tutto.
And maybe it's just Italians loving farting, but again, the kind of like parallel lines, the first remarks, the first insults thrown at Pasqualino's sister were of her insulting her giant ass and making farting noises, and here Pasqualino's experiencing the same thing again. With trying to get rid of the body of Titono. I can't even imagine carrying around all that being a whole human body. Titono's not a slim man. A lot of ass imagery in this movie. Maybe that's just an Italian thing, but I wonder if there's any kind of deeper meaning to it. It's really interesting in this time how prevalent this kind of narrative is to media film depictions of concentration camps. The character who has to like whore themselves out or perform sexual favors for the prison guards. Like, this is narrative to a degree in The Night Porter. It's also in Elsa, the SS she-wolf There's kind of a fascination to a certain degree with either sensationalizing or grappling with the human impetus towards sexuality in the midst of this atrocity. In my mind, to my eyes, that is not the greatest flirt I've ever seen. It's not the greatest come on I've ever seen. But who knows what's in the heart of women? Yeah, so another reflection or parallel. He'll die in front of a firing squad in the way that he'll probably die in the present to a firing squad. And his past experiences has informed him that he'll somehow escape, or he'll somehow find grace, and this will be an instance where his luck has run out.
Io me ne lavo le mani e tu sarai un morto d'onore. Hai capito? No, scegli tu. O a vita o a dignità.
This is a weird parallel, but I wonder if his kissing with his mother, the relationship he has with the mother, is also being reflected in the relationship he has with the commandant. That there's a degree of need and supplication and mothering that he's kind of projecting onto his relationship with her. So he's learned this lesson from his past. Oh my god, I'm really sad that this actually has a very similar structure to Slumdog Millionaire, because I hate Slumdog Millionaire, but this is kind of structured differently, that he's taken a lot of lessons from his past that he believes will drive further his luck, that if he keeps on doing the same things that he did in his past, that he'll get away with it, that he'll slip away unnoticed, that he'll defy the odds, and this is probably what's going to lead to his sticky end.
Politico. Squartatore. Ah. Pasquale Bravuso. Il mostro di Napoli.
And this repeated refrain of him as being the monster of Naples, that his crime is seen as outside of the bounds, abnormal, incredible in the eyes of the public, when they're approaching a time very, very soon where the lengths of his crime will be vastly, vastly diminished by the scale of the World War. And in fact, his crime is actually entirely natural within the confines of Italy at the time, that he's, you know, a member of the mafia, and everybody does this, everybody has killed somebody, has gotten rid of a body. His crime wasn't actually that. His crime was admitting to it, revealing that this element of violence and this element of refutation of the sanctity of life is already present in Italian society here. It's not something that's discovered in war, it's not something that's brought about by war, it's already there. And it's interesting the relationship he has with this mental patient. He views her as an object for sex to kind of expel his desires, and it brings up a question of if he views this woman as a human in the way that he abuses her and takes advantage of her, if he'll similarly be viewed as a human by the wardens at the concentration camp where he kind of like expects a modicum of respect or dignity or humanity. It turns out that those rights aren't inferred to people based on their basic humanity, but they're conferred onto him based on him being a man, based on his position in society, based on his belief in his kind of like in his self-belief as a strong man, as a deserving man. it does put you in a very strange place to watch a movie about a concentration camp a prisoner in a concentration camp, and have such a depiction of their personality. It doesn't really become a story of morality that a lot of like World War II narratives are, in terms of black and white, in terms of right and wrong. It becomes instead a story of hierarchy, of oppression, of people on the bottom rungs being stamped out by people in the middle rungs, being stamped out by people on the higher rungs. There's no morality to this event. There are no good players and bad players. There are the powerful and the weak. So he escaped from this asylum into the forest. Oh, it's the actor from Solo! Look at that! There he is! He doesn't even talk in this. Solo's the same year, isn't it? It's Elsa. I don't know what you've done, but it's worked. I don't know if he's appealed to the good in her heart necessarily. Was the good in his heart what was appealed to when he found that female patient tied up?
Una strega, una maga. No, perché tu mi hai fatto l'altra.
As much as I dislike this character, you know, he's done some shitty stuff, but it's terrifying to see him put in this position, to be reduced down so much by these circumstances. It doesn't even begin to, like, there's no question of whether or not he deserves it. There is no deserve in this instance. This mechanism is far outstrips any human action. Nothing a human being can do warrants this sort of response. And you know what? And yet we have American prisons.
Spogliare. Va buono, sì. Se vuoi divertire. Sono contento che vi faccio.
I hope some men watched this in the 70s or in the 20s and came to the emotional understanding that rape is in fact not a good thing. Seeing this man controlled at the brink of starvation, at the brink of total annihilation, pleading, made miserable, trying to give up everything just so that he could survive. Under those circumstances, perhaps sex is not actually good. It's really miserable seeing him reduced down to this, pleading, begging. You can definitely see the influence on Trunchbull in this depiction. It's weird to think that a movie like Matilda takes inspiration in part from Seven Beauties. Credit to Danny DeVito, I guess. Credit to Roald Dahl, perhaps. It's a horrifying scene. It's a horrifying scene. He can't even take his pants off. He can't even take his shoes off. He has no, like, self-possession to do anything except what he's commanded to do, while he kneels in front of the swastika. It's hard to explain what the difference is between this and La Vita e Bella. I mean, it might just be a matter of taste or preference, but for me, at least right now, this is horrifying and it's funny, but, like, importantly, it's depicting something that could actually happen. Whereas I think within the scope of Life is Beautiful, it takes something so so horrendous, such an enormous act in the scope of world history, of human history, and turns it into a fantasy, an optimistic fantasy, which I think is just strange.
Mangia Napoli.
It's such a sad capitulation. All these dreams, these fantasies, perhaps cruel fantasies, perhaps evil fantasies of women that he's trying to conjure, all these delights of his past in order to survive this one moment, trying to get an erection under such horrible circumstances. Trying to suck all of the pleasure out of all of his past experiences into one point, into one moment of, so that he could survive.
Io voglio vedere I tuoi occhi.
It's horrible. It's also just very, very funny in a very, very cruel way. What is all of the pleasure of your life? Of all 30 years of your life, of all 35 years of your life, when facing the totality of human destruction, of human evil? It's really sad, actually. What are all of the pleasures of life? What is optimism for? What is hope for in the face of such destruction? You'd have to be inhuman to feel pleasure in these circumstances.
Larva subumana mediterranea, riesci a trovare la forza per tua erezione di maschio. Per questo rimarrete voi, vincerete voi, piccoli vermi vitali.
I'm going to pause for a second. I just want to say, I think it's really beautiful characterization of this commandant that after their sexual encounter, for whatever reason, the way that she's shot, the way that she's lit, she looks so tired now. She looks so haggard. She's not the immense creature that was standing before him previously. She's actually weakened after this encounter, and that's reflected in her monologue about her disgust in his virility, in his survivability. And she also reinforces the kind of nationalistic divides, even if those divides don't really mean anything.
Da adesso ti nomino capo della baracca 23, da San Pfeffer. Ti ordino di consegnare 6 uomini per eliminazione.
Voglio manco sapere chi sono. Qui con noi, i primi 6.
That's the most important thing in order to choose 6, that he doesn't know who they are. It's the same thing with the Nazis. As long as you don't know who they are.
Ma tu sei pazza, ma perché?
Perché mi sono rotto il caso.
You really see so much going on with Giancarlo Giannini's performance in this is really excellent, but the focus on close-up shots of his eyes, of his face, and in moments of decision, it's so intense, it's so startling. He's given so much air, so much space in earlier sections of this movie. You don't think it, but in comparison to the decisions he has to make towards the end, the decisions he makes early in this film are really frivolous, and to see the transformation of a man who is kind of given latitude, who's given space and autonomy earlier in the film, and see that slowly stripped away, and every increasing decision he makes is harried and frenzied and impossible. And you see the disintegration of his personhood with those decisions. He didn't end up taking the anarchist. He ended up taking children. All of them were children.
Fratelli, è me butto nella merda! Presto, carogne! L'ombre nell'ordine!
Oh, God! Yeah, we go full circle with the ass and farting imagery. He's beating his own man. They want you to kill your friend. He's wearing the pink triangle? I wonder if that's made up, or if that's like a... if they made that up in order to imprison him, or if that's perhaps a real biographical detail that's been hidden underneath this film. Like, this character is not... something that this character's not come to terms with in his desire for machismo and seeking out, like, a heterosexual display. And this is another reflection with him and Paterno. He's been made to relive the same act over and over again. It's actually kind of similar to what's that Chbosky movie? To that third part of the night. It's actually revealed that he's reliving the same trial over and over again. With all these dolls. He's been fully emasculated, I guess. Nothing about him is a man anymore. He's just a rat that survives. To cause the end of the world. So we have to proliferate.
Guarda, figlio mio, tu stai una bellezza. Mo' è finita. Non ci pensai più a sti miseri.
That's a beautiful composition. Look at that. Seriously. Oh my god. Not even being able to see him in the reflections. Oh, Jesus. I don't know what it is. Perhaps it's like I don't know. The comedy kind of really highlighted the tragedy of this character. I think him being such a fool and such a chauvinist and so thoroughly unlikable, such a fucking villain in this movie, really made his fall that much more intense. It didn't make it a story of evil triumphing over good or the battle between good and evil. It became the story of how humanity is squashed by brutality. Just an incredible depiction of a character who is like supremely unlikable, being reduced down to something that you can't even look at. It's tragic. I've traced pretty similar I've watched pretty similar narratives on this channel, whether it be Night Porter or Third Part of the Night, and I think all of these movies are very effective in their own rights, but this specifically was emotionally overwhelming. Not in the same way as the Night Porter. The Night Porter is devastating, and this is like overwhelming in a like melodramatic sense, that there's so many shifts in tone and in temperature, and I think it creates really extreme highs and lows. I don't even know what I would consider the highs of this, but perhaps the highs of this character being reprehensible and deplorable, to the lows of this character being sympathetic and tragic. But yeah, I really appreciate it in terms of like this being similar to Third Part of the Night, the kind of parallelism that was being drawn on the story of Pasqualino, from him being in Naples to him being in the concentration camp. Yeah, I think it's a story about survival and how much you're willing to sacrifice in order to survive. And in the end, the greatest sacrifice is that of compliance. Pasqualino's complies with any order that's given to him, and he loses out his humanity at the end. The transformation of him from being like virile and sex hungry and starved for the attention of women and basking in the attention of women, to him at the end being subservient in his sexuality, needing to perform sex acts in order to survive, and then turning once again at the end into somebody who wishes to procreate solely to batten down the hatches, to reinforce his family line, so that when they're attacked again, they'll have a greater force to combat it. It's like that's not defiance, that's not will, that's fear. Fear possessing every bone in his body, and it's just such a tragic it's just such a tragedy, it's such a tragic transformation. The one thing that this character like loved in the world, his relationship with women, the sex that he has with women, good and bad, being transformed into something that's so pitiful and so in its own way utilitarian, but also mad within that utility. It's a great film. I can see what the appeal is. I do wonder if within the specific camp they're in, if they were all assigned the pink triangle. Maybe it's just like me not understanding what the pink triangle signifies or what it can signify, but I do wonder if that was just like the term that was assigned to them in order to justify their internment, or if there's some other element to Pasqualino's characterization or identity that I wasn't leaning on to. Yeah, cool. That was Seven Beauties. Check it out if you haven't seen it already. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more old, obscure, and art house films. And until next time, watch other World War II films besides La Vita e Bella and Saving Private Ryan. That's all I have to say for now. Bye!